Hey folks, welcome back to Basic Design. We've skipped a couple days because as we get towards the end of the semester, as I've talked about, it's a cumulative class. Students are working on projects and there's less content being delivered and it's more practice that they're actually engaging in the creative practice and making things. Uh, so this today was the last in-process critique before the final project. And it's a great day because we've already critiqued the patterns. We're now critiquing the alphabet. So I introduced typography and talked to them about that in the last session. And I like this critique because I get to do something that I don't get to do in very many art classes, and that is talk about craft. In the parlance of today in the arts and crafts have been separated. This arguably started around the 19th century, but the Bauhaus in particular kind of like did some integration and some disintegration of these two notions. But one way to explain it is art today is highly conceptual and it's about the meaning or the concepts that are trying to be communicated, and craft movements are more about the quality of the craftsmanship, so to speak, of a product. I like design in a context like Hope College because I get to see and talk about both of those coming together in design. There are times and places when designers need to be highly conceptual. I think of artists like, or designers like Elliot Earls, Martin Vanesky, uh, even Stefan Sagmeister and Jessica Walsh. Paula Scher's paintings are like her conceptual side of her. My argument as a whole for teaching this class in this kind of context is that the best designers are artists as well. And that learning design, it's more important that you learn to be a creative and then you get the practical experience of being a designer in a bunch of different contexts and you learn the technical aspects separately. So you can see that I am of the mindset that has bought into the split of arts and crafts, whether you like that or not. Talk to me in the comments below or whatever. And but often, like the conceptual school I went to, the School of Museum of Fine Arts, like you never hear talk about craft basically at all. Whereas here in this class, I get to take this moment when we're talking about typography in this sense of I'd say the spirit of craftsmanship. I'm not teaching like highly technical skills. The accreditors literally won't allow me to do that. But rather, I like showing students what the spirit of a designer is. So often, what a designer is doing is going in, catching a client's vision, trying to figure out all of the things I know how to do, all of my experimentation, all of this. How can I refine this towards that person's goal? And you see this a lot in typographers. I'll link it above one of these places. A video I like to show of Anthony Bourdain, a short clip from his, I think it's called Raw Craft, which again, buying into the arts and craft notion, where he goes to Albion Press in San Francisco and looks at these people who are creating these wonderful books, old books, Don Quixote, some new art monographs as well, different plays and things like that. And they're creating these tremendous pieces, these books that are, I think they're selling for like $800. Don Quixote, I think for both volumes is something like $2,000. These insane pieces that I will not be able to afford for a very long time, that's for sure. But the way that they take their skills in order to serve the thing, one of the lines talks about, the founder talks about this sense of taking something amazing like a book and giving it the attention to detail and the love, and so that when people grab the book they can feel the heft of it, so to speak, and not just the heft of the weight of the book, but all of it going into it, all of the materials selected meticulously, all of the typesetting. And I like to, this is like a moment in our curriculum where students get to see this and think through this sort of spirit that I think is missing in a lot of art contexts, which is why I like teaching what I teach, because I am of the belief that artists are not so much about having ideas as finding ideas. And so the designer mentality of listening to and finding out what the client is interested in, doing market research, trying to bring it all together into a package that makes the most sense is a humbling experience that is not just going out and saying, I'm a genius, you should listen to me. And a lot of artists need that because, in the same way, like what I have them do through this class, they start with an image of an insect and like they're creating interesting typefaces with voices and patterns that can work in all kinds of atmospheres. And it's like you found that in the insect. If you hadn't spent the time looking at it, extracting from it, experimenting, exploring, like if I had told them on day one that they were going to make, typefaces that could work for a silly new rebranding of Thomas the Tank Engine or a kid's adventure show or a horror movie and all this stuff. It's like, what? From the bug? How would that happen? It's like, that's what they've learned is this process. How do you mine something? How do you attend to it that you might find interesting ideas that can develop and flourish into other realms? And in my class, because I'm open to both designers and artists, sometimes it's like you take it from the insect and it goes off in this place and it is so disconnected, it never comes back, which is fine. You use that as your jumping off point. And some it's like you want to be more like a designer. You're taking the thing and you're trying to figure out where are the things that are worthwhile for your end goals. And you're mining broadly in order to find stuff, but then you're refining more towards a specific direction. So around this time of the class, I start giving them the end goal, uh, sort of what they're going to be doing earlier than I do in the other projects, so that they have this choice and this experience, both of the design process, but also the creative artistic process. So that's what happens today. It's great. We get a lot of cool conversations. I introduce them to terms like kerning and how are they letter spacing and thinking about how do I create something that can be used over and over in a consistent, unified manner. But this is all review of things we've already covered. So from here on out, there will probably be less videos. I will do a few on what the final project is and how I go about talking about and thinking about that, because it is a mix of these two processes that I'm talking about as well. But that's what we've covered in the last like 2 days, really, because the patterns critique is very similar of trying to feel and see you made two sets. Are they actually unified sets or would they work better? Can you intermingle them? And what can these sets be? How could they exist in the world in a way that we would not be surprised? We'd be like, yeah, that does work as a tie. This works as a background, the accent wall in a interior design store, or those sorts of things. This is where we start bringing these notions around to meaning. We've really gone from the first and second stage of visual processing into that third stage of how do we consistently connotate specific meanings through the work we're making, and how do we frame it or contextualize it. So how do you attend to the audience and how do you contextualize the work so that you can have some degree of a consistent response to it? We're not trying to say that it is just visual communication or anything like that. That is not how I teach. But we are trying to think about, how do we bring all these skills together in a consistent and repeatable ways. And that's why I teach the process, not a series of specific steps that if you want to make a logo, this is what you do. No, exploration, refinement, testing, analyzing, back. That's the process I teach. Is you do this over and over as many times as it takes to find the thing. And so you're constantly paying attention to what's happening to the work. And that's where I think I like being able to pick from both baskets for a class like this. All right. I'll see you later.